Hello and welcome to this history of the steel helmets used by the Swiss Army. I will be going into details of the three main families of combat helmets, the M18, the M48 and the M71, which were used from the end of the First World War until very recently, in the case of the M71 in reserve stocks. I won't be going into detail of parachute helmets or tank crewman helmets because I don't have enough details on those, I haven't done enough research and I don't possess examples to actually show you, but I will be going into those three main groups. The story begins at the end of the First World War, and it was clear to anyone who was watching that the old headgear used by the Swiss military, the charcots made of leather and felt, weren't really suitable to provide protection against things like shrapnel from artillery, and it was quite clear that a steel helmet, much harder, able to provide much better protection, was needed. And so, an artist by the name of Charles Le Platinier was commissioned by the army to design a helmet for use, and he duly did so. Came up with a very nice artistic design, lots of curves to it, and a sort of separate Swiss cross badge made from steel on the front. Some variants had a mesh face guard to prevent from sort of things flying up and hitting you in the face. But these helmets, while very nice aesthetically, were not the easiest to produce, and when the supply of steel arrived at the factory to be tested, it turned out that the stamping machines couldn't really produce this design, and although troop trials had been decently favourable, it was considered impossible to mass produce, and there were a few quite unsavoury exchanges between Le Platinier and the General Staff, and in the end he was sort of accused by them of prioritising aesthetics over utility, and he responded that that was the right way to do things, and in the end it didn't go anywhere, and instead Dr. Edvard Gessler, the director of the Swiss National Museum, and Paul Boesch, an officer of the Swiss General Staff, produced their own design. That design was this, the M18, and this is an original M18, which can be identified by the liner band which goes all the way around rather than the lace band which you'll see in a couple of minutes. This is a very distinctive, very elegant looking shape in my opinion. I really do like the way these look. Sort of distinctive shape you can see, with a sort of prominent peak at the front and flares at the side to protect your ears, providing good all-round protection from, again, shell fragmentation, which is the main thing helmets of the era were designed to protect against. There's two vents on the back to sort of keep you cool, and on the whole, for 1918, a pretty good helmet. There's some sort of superficial similarities with the American No. 5 helmet, which was trialled, and similar idea, although they weren't actually connected. This is actually draws much more lineage from the German M16 style helmet, although in my opinion it looks a lot nicer. These were originally finished, as this one is, with a smooth green paint, although I say as this one is, it's quite a rough example. It's got quite a bit of rust on it, there's no pads or chin strap, but in places it has still got the paint, which makes it quite interesting from a historical perspective. And this green paint looks pretty good. It was green, so it was decent for camouflaging, though the smoothness, the gloss finish, was not very good for camouflage, particularly if it rained or it was at night when it would sort of glisten, sparkle and reflect light and give soldiers positions away. One report said that in moonlight it was visible from 300 metres away as a sort of glint, which was of course not very good. As a result, in 1940 they were withdrawn and repainted with a matte finish made by mixing black paint with sawdust, which you can see here. This isn't an original M18, but the paint finish is representative of what we've done. It's got much less glare, much darker, much harder to spot, and that's much better. In 1943, the helmets were redesigned slightly. This angle was changed, which reduced the number of stampings it needed on the liner band. It was changed so that instead of going all the way around, it only went 3/4 of the way around, sort of U-shape, because it didn't need a full liner band. This back section did nothing. It reduced the amount of materials needed and reduced the cost and reduced the time required to produce these helmets, which was useful because the Swiss Army was expanding massively during their wartime mobilisations. Now this isn't actually an M1840, which is the designation given for those. You sometimes see them referred to as M1843s because they were introduced in 43, but the actual military designation was M1840. You quickly learn with Swiss stuff that the number often doesn't quite correspond to the actual date they came into use. But anyway, the M1840, which looked a lot like this, was replaced in terms of manufacturing in 1963 by the M1863, which is what this is, well sorry, the M1840-63, although you see them referred to as M63s, M1863s, M1843-63s, etc. But this is the M4063. The main change here is the liner bands. Instead of using a system with two eyelets, which is what the originals had, they changed to a single, just fold with the leather. It's folded over and stitched, which again just reduces costs and complexity a little bit, makes them a little bit cheaper to make, and that's the only real change made in 63. You also see a few different variations of chin strap, and generally these chin straps on the M18s, you have a hook on this side that comes down here, and a spring clip here, fastens very easily. It's adjustable at this end with this buckle, and that's all there really is to the M18. As I say, very good shape, pretty good protection, although eventually became outdated. These remained in use until the 1980s with non-frontline troops when they were sort of phased out, replaced by M71s and M48s, which brings me to this, the M48. These were primarily used by the mechanised and light troops and the military police, although later on, post-introduction of the M71, you do see them from time to time with artillery troops, such as M109 howitzer crews, I've seen those, and communication troops, particularly I've seen them used with carrier pigeon soldiers, but mostly used by the military police, as with this example. That's what the two white stripes and the letter P indicate. It has those features as an ex-police one. And of course the light troops, Panzer Grenadiers, APC crews, you see them with jeep drivers, reconnaissance teams, basically everyone from that particular corps. Now, if you know your Second World War British stuff, this may look vaguely familiar to you, which is because originally these were made by purchasing around 13,000 surplus helmet steel airborne troops, helmet steel Royal Armed Corps, and dispatch rider helmet shells, which were then refurbished, repainted, fitted with a Swiss liner made of leather with chin strap, has a little buckle on it, and quite a simple construction. At the back, not all of them have this, but quite a few do have this feature of, I don't know how easy to see, a row of poplars onto which a neck warmer fastens. Won't face it now, but essentially it goes around like that. And this has little ventilated portions to go on your ears so you can still hear, and flaps so the chin strap can go through it. And those are used particularly on military police ones, although you do see them with the mech and light troops. Anyway, this helmet in particular is from the 1960s or so, when a new run of shells were produced in Switzerland to supplement stocks of original British ones. These can be most easily identified by the fact that they have a rolled rim to them, as with all Swiss helmets pretty much, whereas original British production ones had a simple fold on the stamping. These are rolled, and that's how you can spot them. Now, these, again, weren't the general issue combat helmet, they weren't used by everyone, and the M18 remained in use for most infantry, so the Grenadiers, the Fusiliers, the Schutzen, up until the 70s, when this was brought in, the M71. Development on these started in around 1960, when we recognised that a new, more modern helmet was needed. The general shape of the shell, which is quite distinctive, was finalised in 1966, more or less, but they didn't enter issue until 1971, going straight to frontline infantry units before anyone else. And this, again, has quite a distinctive shape, but also very different to the earlier patterns. You can see at the front, it's very wide open, no peak as on the M18, much more smooth and rounded shape, no angles to it. The sides are still quite flared to provide good protection for the ears when you have it on your head, but without the sort of angled cut, or not cut but stamp, that created a sharp edge between the flare and the general shape of the head. The liners on these are very reminiscent of the M48, although these use a clip and a hook rather than a buckle. They have 4 pads which are fitted to an internal metal suspension, which is then padded with foam and fitted to the actual shell itself. Now, as I say, the buckle tightened quite similarly to the M18 with sorry, not the buckle, the clip, but the chin strap is tightened with this hook here, hooks on like so, nice and secure. It's got a 4-point liner setup where Unlike the M18, which is fitted in only 2 places, it's just generally better design. From the late 1990s, or actually from the early 1990s, sorry, these hooks were fitted to the backs of the helmets, D-rings, which were there to allow you to carry the helmet by hooking it to your uniform, hanging it up, or putting it on a wall, etc. But the Combat Eagles have a carabiner hook that you can hang the helmet from when you're not wearing it on your head. These remained in use into the 1990s, into the early 2000s, when they were replaced by the Schubert Gefechtshelm as the Helm MO4, or Helmet MO4 in English. With these little hooks on the back, I forgot to add that the majority of these are simply fastened on by folding over the end and hooking it onto the rim. Some of them are also riveted on, and thus don't come out easily. This, for example, has a name tag that had the hook fitted over the top of it, implying that it was sort of after the helmets had been originally issued. These are dated on the inside of the aluminium bit. This is a 81 helmet, and they were made in a variety of sizes, unlike the M18. The M48, actually no, sorry, the M48 was made in sizes. The M18 was not made in different sizes. You simply adjust the inside of the liner. Each of these pads contains a little cloth pillow, and you would take those out or add them in and then tighten the drawstring to adjust the side on your head. The M48 was made in 3 sizes, A, B and C, and to the best of my knowledge there were 5 sizes for the M71. The vast majority of these that exist nowadays are 57 to 58, and these do also have the pads and drawstring like the M18 and the M48, which allow you to adjust it more finely once you have the general shell size that fits you. Sorry, liner size. There were also, I think, 3 sizes of shell, although I don't know how you identify those, and that's something that warrants a bit more research before I can more conclusively say anything on the subject. So, that brings us to the end of the 3 main families. No, it doesn't. One bonus one I forgot to mention. The yellow ones. These were used by the Civil Defence. This particular one is a standard M18 4063, painted yellow to be sort of easy to spot and distinctive as a Civil Defence one rather than the military one. Of course, the Civil Defence is beneficial to be seen and it's beneficial to hide. As well as standard M18 4063s, they did also have quite a rare variant, the M18 46, which is made from an aluminium steel alloy called duralumin. They were trialled by the army because they were lighter but supposedly just as rigid as steel. In the end they weren't adopted, and the stocks were painted yellow and handed over to the civilians. The easiest way to spot those, if you're sort of looking to buy one in photographs, is that the liner pads, instead of having the U-shaped band of the 63, you only have the liner band exactly where the liner pads are fitted to the shell, so there's no gaps in between, no sort of space of liner band, there is just a gap of bare metal. And that's that one. That brings me to the end, actually this time, of the first part of this video. I will be producing a second part on helmet covers in the near future. I couldn't promise exactly when it will be done, but at some point there will be a part on helmet covers. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.